Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fulgham Law Firm. Thank you for joining us today on our YouTube channel. Today, I want to cover with you the specifics of domestic violence law in Texas. Let's examine the three types of domestic violence cases in Texas, and then let's very briefly examine some ways that you can defend that if maybe you or a loved one is facing that type of charge. And I also want to thank you for joining us today. I want to give you the opportunity to download a free ebook at the end of this video, What to Do If You've Been Charged with a Domestic Violence Crime in Texas. We'll get to that at the end of the video, but let's jump right into this. So when we're looking at domestic violence crimes in Texas, we really tend to break it down into three specific types of domestic violence cases. And so one of the first one, let's just talk about basic domestic assault or family violence assault, okay? So domestic assault is a threat, as the penal code defines it. It is a threat or act of violence against a person whom the defendant has an intimate relationship. Now, when we talk about assault is very specific. You're contacting someone, and in the process of literally physically contacting them, it's causing them pain, physical pain. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we talk about domestic assault. And then it's basically a regular assault, but you have a special relationship. Now, these relationships include the following: a current or former spouse, a current or former dating partner, parent of a child or children that were involved in the incident, child of current or former spouse, a foster child or foster parent, blood relatives or adopted relatives, and roommates. Those are some examples of the type of situations. So an act of assault involves bodily injury to any person in those included categories that I just provided to you. Now, here's one key thing. The alleged assault must be intentional. It must be something that was done intentionally, knowingly, and sometimes the prosecutors try to allege it as reckless. What do I mean by that? Well, it's important because there's a big difference between what someone is intending to do. Someone walks up and punches somebody in the face, an intentional act, or whether or not it was an accident. And many times what may feel like it was intentional at the time the police show up, later on people have a tendency to look back on it and say, you know what, we need to clarify a few things here. This wasn't something that was meant to happen. This was an accident. And so if it's an accident, we're not talking about a crime. Okay? It needs to be something that was an intentional, knowing or reckless act that took place. So a conviction for a domestic violence assault in Texas is a Class A misdemeanor. That means it can be punishable by up to 1 year in the county jail and up to a $4,000 fine. So if a prior conviction, if someone has a prior domestic violence on their record, that new domestic violence charge can actually be enhanced up to a third-degree felony that could be punishable by up to 10 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. So it's very important, as you can guess, you don't want to have any of these on your record, because if you have one of them on your record, if anything else happens for the rest of your life, you're talking about a felony charge. All right. Now, the second example we're going to look at, point number 2, we talked about three types of domestic violence cases. The second example we're going to look at is aggravated domestic assault cases. And this is basically a derivative of an aggravated assault charge. So this charge applies for acts of serious bodily injury where someone suffers a serious bodily injury to the alleged victim. What do we mean by serious bodily injury? It means a permanent loss of use or a protracted loss of use of a bodily organ or a bodily member. So you're talking about someone literally can no longer walk. So they're crippled for the rest of their life. Or their face literally, they had to have reconstructive surgery or something along those lines. So that's one example, an assault that results in serious bodily injury. And then the other one is one where there is a deadly weapon involved. So there could be a domestic violence assault where a weapon is involved. And in that situation, it could be any item that in its intended use could be causing serious bodily injury or death. So I always joke about this, but if I had a pen, technically a pen could be used if I wanted to poke somebody through their eyeballs. Literally, if I used it for that purpose, it could be seen as a deadly weapon. But what do you see most common? You see guns. knives. You see those type of things. I mean, those are the examples of what you normally think of as a deadly weapon. Now, this really steps things up a little bit because you're talking about if you're convicted of an aggravated domestic violence charge, it's a second-degree felony up to 20 years in prison. Finally, we're going to talk about the third example is continuous family violence. So this is a continuous violence against the family. This is a charge where someone is alleged to have committed 2 or more domestic assaults in the span of literally a year period, okay? So over a 12-month period, someone's committed 2 domestic assaults during that period of time. So the charge can apply whether the previous crimes resulted in arrests or convictions, and it can apply for multiple victims. This is a pretty serious charge because you're looking now at a third-degree felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. Now, how do you attack that example? Well, one way to attack it is if one of the alleged assaults that took place is unable to be proven, immediately it drops back down to a misdemeanor charge. So people ask me all the time, well, Jeff, how do you attack these types of cases? How is it that you're able to go about it? Well, the first question you need to ask is, does the alleged victim want to prosecute? If the alleged victim does not want to prosecute, it's important that an affidavit of non-prosecution be prepared and clarity is provided to the prosecutor about what actually took place. And a good, experienced attorney can make sure and walk you through that process so that you know that truth is able to be exposed to the prosecutor and that you're treated fairly. But secondly, you want to see examples of any inconsistencies. Is the person alleging to have been hurt? Are there any visible injuries? Is there any proof to back up the claims? Sometimes people in a moment of rage or anger or just feeling hurt in circumstances can have a tendency to feel like they maybe say certain things that may not be supported by the rest of the evidence. That needs to be examined. Thirdly, you want to make sure that the police accurately obtained information from the alleged victim. Sometimes the police are there. They have a zero tolerance policy against domestic violence. Many times police officers are trained to ask very kind of not really open-ended, but closed-ended questions. Yes or no? Could this have hurt? Did this happen? And then all of a sudden, all that information on the page may not accurately reflect what the alleged victim believes took place. Your attorney needs to make sure and go over that thoroughly, okay? Now, I gave you an example already. As you can see, domestic violence assault can range from a misdemeanor offense all the way up to a very high-level felony where someone could serve many, many years in prison. So I say that to say this, it's very important that you have an attorney fight this case. You cannot, and I want to make this perfectly clear, you cannot take deferred adjudication on a domestic violence case and subsequently get that off your record. There are many other cases in Texas that you can do that with, but if you take a deferred adjudication probation on a domestic violence case, you're forever barred from getting it off your record. So you need to fight to get the case dismissed or resolved in a way that you can get it removed from your record. So I appreciate you joining us here today on our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed what you heard today, subscribe to our channel. And I promised you if you waited around to the end of this video, I would give you a free ebook, What to Do If You've Been Charged with a Domestic Violence Case in Texas. Click the link below. I'll be glad to send you over that free ebook. And I want to thank you for joining us here at the Fulgham Law Firm on our YouTube channel. And if you are facing this type of offense, maybe a loved one or yourself are facing this type of situation, don't hesitate to contact us at the Fulgham Law Firm at 817-877-3030. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.